This episode is supported by PIMCO, a global leader in active fixed income with deep expertise across public and private markets. PIMCO invests their clients' capital in income and credit opportunities that span the liquidity spectrum, leveraging their decades of experience navigating complex debt markets. Their flexible capital base and deep relationships with issuers have helped them become one of the world's largest providers of traditional and alternative investment solutions and a valued financing partner. Visit pimco.com to learn more.
So the most important thing in my mind is the upcoming shift that is going to happen, that is really going to change everything within the wealth management industry. And the big shift is that women are going to be inheriting 2/3 of the nation's wealth within the next 6 years, which is absolutely incredible. This has never, ever happened before.
I'm Aoife David, and welcome to the 50 Faces podcast, a podcast committed to revealing the richness and diversity of the world of investment by focusing on its people and their stories. I'm joined today by Cary Carbonaro, who's an award-winning financial advisor, a woman and wealth expert, and a CFP board ambassador. She's currently Senior Vice President of Advisors Capital, where she was noted in the 2024 NASDAQ Advisor Council and as a top advisor in 2023 Investopedia. Welcome, Cary. Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. Happy to be here.
Well, fantastic to have you. Let's start with the background, if you don't mind. Just a quick run through your background. You have an extensive resume with many chapters within the field of wealth management. Can you start with where you grew up, what you studied, and how you ended up in this field?
Sure, absolutely. So my dad was a banker, and so I grew up around money. My undergraduate, however, was in history because I thought I was going to be a history teacher or professor. And then after I graduated from undergraduate, I decided to get my MBA in marketing and finance. And then I wound up getting my first job was right out of college was for JP Chase in the management training program. And so I went directly into the wealth management space, so to speak, and started my first job with private banking in New York City with clients and one-on-one, and really got my feet wet with working with high-end individuals and realized I was very, very good with people. But I sort of already knew that, but it was just really interesting to actually do it and get paid for it and know that I'm very good at it. I remember even in the branches back in the day, I had a couple of people tell me, "Oh, you're not going to stay. You're too good to stay in this role." And I was like, "Really?" And they were like, "Yes." And they were right. And I didn't. and I moved on. After I got my MBA, I went into the management training program for the MBA executive level for JP Chase. And that was when kind of early days of the internet. So that's when I started getting involved with electronic banking and really cutting edge stuff back then. We were the first ones to have online banking back in the day. And then really I pivoted and moved into the investment side of online stuff. And then I worked for Lord Abbett Mutual Funds. And I was head of electronic marketing or digital banking or e-wealth or whatever you want to call it. So that end, so mirroring like new technology and the old stuff, which is just the regular standby investments and management and all that kind of stuff and working with advisors. And then I started my own practice around 9/11 time. So I had left New York City. Well, I mean, I was in New York City when it happened, and then I left New York City after it happened. And I relocated to Central Florida and decided to dust my CFP off the shelf and start taking clients. And so that's been a roller coaster journey as well, but mostly good. I had my own practice. Then I merged with United Capital, which I was a partner. And then unfortunately, United Capital got sold to Goldman Sachs. And I lost 4 years of my life. And then I've emerged on the other side right now, trying to figure out what's next, but trying to get myself back to where I was pre the sale to Goldman.
Well, I think you've taken care of the surprising turns question, which I normally ask at this stage. But I'd love to ask you a bit about the building visibility, because clearly you have to do that now twice, building your own brand and visibility. How do you go about that?
So, such a good question. You know, it's interesting growing up in New York and having lots and lots of press contacts and connections and friends and colleagues and things like that. I guess I've always been in that world in the sense of I'm very good at PR and branding and marketing because that's sort of where I came from. I was a marketer before I was a financial advisor. So I actually feel like I have a jump on everybody else because it's very easy for me. And then as far as PR goes, I do have a lot of connections within New York, which is, the center of the world when it comes to media and contacts and publishing and things like that. So it was interesting because I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to restart myself again after being, a 4-year hiatus. I said, I think people may have thought I died during COVID. Like not even exaggerating. Like that's how much I disappeared off the face of the earth. So people, I don't know if they didn't know I wasn't there or they did know I wasn't there, but I wasn't there. I couldn't speak. I couldn't write. I couldn't go on TV. I couldn't go on social media. I couldn't have an opinion. It was incredibly difficult for me to just cut off everything that I was doing my entire career. And I guess to turn it back on, it was a lot of luck, a lot of being in the right place at the right time, a lot of using my old contacts, a lot of holding myself out there again. So just for example, just getting myself back on social media and then starting to interact and starting to have my opinions and starting to make my posts. That started to sort of snowball. And then it was interesting because even on the TV side, since I had been away for so long, I had one of my producers call me up from WPIX, which is in New York. And she didn't even know that I was missing for 4 years. But she was at a new station and she said, "Oh, I'd like to pitch you for this new station. You'd be great. Is that okay?" And I'm like, "Absolutely." And then, of course, the new station then picked me up and then I started doing morning news for them. She didn't even know. She didn't even know that I was missing. So it's kind of crazy. And then I've always been a CFP board ambassador. So I got to then lean on that and writing my articles and being quoted in all the magazines and being held out for the profession as somebody who speaks to the media for the profession. And so I've always done that. So I've been that for 10 years. I just couldn't do it for the 4 years that I was at Goldman.
It's really interesting. I think of the expression, but trust arriving on foot, but leaving on horseback. It takes so long to build a reputation, build trust. It can be lost quickly. And I think it probably is a good lesson for young people thinking about building their own identity and building it separately versus building it in conjunction with an entity that might change hands many times. And I think it's a cautionary tale, certainly around the building that own identity and nurturing that because it has taken a long time to build that trust. So really interesting insights. Thank you for that. Tied to that, and the shape of asset management, wealth management is clearly changing. How have you seen that change? And looking forward now, what would you say are some of the hallmarks of the wealth management industry now and for the next 5 years?
So the most important thing in my mind is the upcoming shift that is going to happen, that is really going to change everything within the wealth management industry. And the big shift is that women are going to be inheriting 2/3 of the nation's wealth within the next 6 years, which is absolutely incredible. This has never, ever happened before. Right now, we're at 1/3 of the nation's wealth, and it's going to be setting to double. So what's interesting about this is, as you know, it is built by men for men. Women have been an afterthought in the industry. We are very much a minority in the industry. On the advisor side, we're about 10 to 20%, maybe 25 max, depending on which lens you're looking through. On the CFP side, it's about 24%, which is actually up from 20. So that's good. However, in those numbers, you've got a lot of support staff, you've got a lot of teachers, you've got a lot of people who are not practicing as rainmakers, meaning bringing in clients. So the whole industry has a lot to do to get ready for this upcoming shift. I don't think we're ready for it yet. I would like to do everything I can to get ready for it. I'm ready for it, but the industry is not, because the language is not female friendly. The experience is not female friendly. Women distrust financial services. They don't feel comfortable. They don't feel confident. The experience has not been positive for them overall, unless, they meet an advisor who they can connect with and that person is their advocate. In general, most women do not have a positive view of financial services.
And how do you go about changing that? What's top of mind for you besides your writing, your speaking? How are you delivering a different kind of a service?
So it's funny. I'm actually writing a book on it as we speak. And so I'm looking at every aspect of how I relate to clients and women. So I'm changing the language. First of all, I'm trying to make it female friendly. So like, for example, I wrote an article where I'm comparing shoes to asset classes, and I am certainly not dumbing it down. I'm just speaking in the language that women want to hear versus talking about sports analogies, which is what they're always talking about when it comes to investing. So I'm making it a little bit more fun and interesting. And then I'm also comparing the financial planning pyramid to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Women like that as well, because it's a relatable analogy, I believe, more towards women than towards men. I'm doing what I've always done, which is be a female advocate and really be side by side with my clients. I try to have the whole experience comfortable for them. I meet in my home office so that they're comfortable. They have tissues on my desk if they want to cry about a divorce or a death, so that, it's a super safe place. I feel like I'm a combination teacher, therapist, more so than anything else. And then, of course, we talk about their finances and how I can help them. But I'm definitely a teacher and a therapist first. And then also, I just want to make it so that clients are comfortable enough to ask any question under the sun, and that, there's nothing off limits, and you never have to feel insecure or that you don't know what you don't know. I'm going to make it so that they're as comfortable as possible so I can support them in this process. And guess what? Since women are going to be the new face of wealth, this is what it's going to have to do. It's going to have to change, and it's going to have to be more towards what makes women tick.
And obviously within that, there's going to be many generations, much different level of sophistication and comfort level with technology. What have you found to be effective these days as a follow-up tool? I'm thinking blog posts, mini videos, linking to some of the articles you write. How do you keep that? Because obviously education needs to be repeated to be truly embedded.
So I don't know if I have the exact formula, but I am definitely an over communicator, and I'm fine with that. Probably a male. I've been told a couple of times that you're repeating the same message too many times. And I've been told by women, you're not repeating it enough. So I will continue to do what I'm doing. I feel sometimes like a broken record, and I meet my clients wherever that is. If they need to be called, if they need to be emailed, if they need to be sent links, if they need videos, if they need any way they need to communicate. I was kidding the other day, but I wasn't kidding. I was on a panel and I said, I get DMs from Instagram from my clients. And if that's the way they're communicating with me, I'm going to be fine with that. So obviously from a compliance perspective, compliance does not want to hear that I'm getting DMs through Instagram or Facebook, but they're not asking me for money. They're just reaching out to me.
And the broader industry as a whole, how does that have to change in terms of having more female advisors coming into CFP, et cetera? How do you think that we're doing in terms of where we need to get to?
Okay, well, we're doing terrible. We really haven't moved that much over the past 2 decades, but we are doing some things and we're getting a little bit better. The issue is that there's so many issues and nobody really has the direct answer. But one of the things is the CFP board has what's called the Center for Financial Planning. And that is a nonprofit arm where they say you have to see it to be it. And they're doing a whole campaigns around women, around Latinos, around African Americans. And they're trying to say, go into the communities and say, hold people up and say, this is what it's like to be a CFP. So again, see it to be it is really important. But if we don't do anything, we're never going to move the numbers. So we have to start someplace. Another thing recently that CFP board did, which I was involved with, was the Girl Scouts, the National Girl Scout Convention last year in Orlando. We sponsored a huge booth. We took thousands of girls through our adulting game. We taught them what it was to be retired, what it was to be a CFP. We had future CFP stickers and headbands and selfie stick pictures. So I'm telling you, every single girl that came through that booth now knows what a CFP is and did not know before.
I love it. Let's move to talk a little bit about your board roles, because that's another place where diversity really matters. Can you speak about what you think makes a successful board member or chair in your view?
Sure. So it's interesting. I'm definitely not a chair right now. Well, I guess I was a chair in a couple of roles in the past. So I was chair of the FPA. I was also founding president of the WGA, which is the Women's Giving Alliance, which is part of South Lake Foundation. And I'm also on the board of Portland College Foundation Board. And so that's a new role for me within the past year. What makes a good board member? Somebody who's got a heart for service, who's willing to give of their time and energy and expertise, and is just going to open arms and give as much as they possibly can, money, time.
We talked about your career journey, and there were some setbacks and challenges in there. We've spoken about needing to rebuild a brand and a visibility. Any other setbacks or challenges or just lessons learned over the course of a career that's been so expansive?
Yeah, I would say that if I could go back and do it again, I would take more risks. And I feel like everyone says that. It's kind of a little bit passé, but you have nothing to lose in your 20s to swing for the fences. You really have nothing to lose in your 30s to swing for the fences. You almost have nothing to lose in your 40s to swing from the fences. So I just feel like that's one thing that I think holds women back a little bit more than men is they're willing to just go for it and really take the huge risks. It's just women are a little bit less risk averse. And so it's funny because here I am, I started my practice from scratch. And here I am now going back into committing to relaunching myself at this stage of the game. The other thing I believe that's really important, and I have done this my entire career, so I wouldn't say that I would, but this is something I would tell somebody else. And that would be to be incredibly authentic and true to yourself, because I always say, be yourself because everyone else is already taken. So you have to be yourself. So I always think that that's crazy when somebody's trying to imitate somebody else or trying to look at what other people are doing. And you should not be wasting an ounce of energy on that and just focus on yourself and who you are.
And you've mentioned some of the inspiration throughout your journey so far. Was there anyone in particular that was a mentor to you or anyone that you watched and emulated who had an influence on how your career developed?
So for me, it was my father. And he was my biggest cheerleader, fan, mentor. And unfortunately, he actually passed away when I was in my mid 30s. So I only had him from early 20s to mid 30s. And then since then, I unfortunately haven't had anybody specific that I have looked to or who has mentored me. However, I am huge giving back to the next generation. So I've got a lot of people underneath me that I mentor, but I wish I had somebody above me, actually.
When we look at wisdom, maybe that you've gathered over the course of your career or that you share with your female clients or any of your clients, anything that you can say as maybe as a creed or a motto that you have?
So I would say, and these are, again, I don't know if they were creeds or mottos, but I would say always spend less than you make, because that's the way to wealth. And that there's no get rich quick, only get rich slow. And I always say that one. And then another one that I like to say to my women clients, and it's for men too, but that credit cards are not free money. And a lot of people look at them that way. And if they do, they're going to regret it. So those are just my simple little get rich slow tips.
I'd like to go back on the risk-taking question, just to ask one more thing about that, because I think this is one of the hardest things to learn. And it might be particularly hard for women because they're not encouraged maybe to take risk throughout their careers and upbringing. So how do you get clients comfortable taking risks? How do you get them to walk with you? Do you start small with lower stakes and build up to higher risks? Or do you just talk to them about managing risk and not being afraid of risk per se?
So I guess it depends how you define risk. So for me, it would not be related to stocks and bonds, because to me, there is no risk in stocks and bonds if you have a long-term horizon. So if I'm going to be 100% in stocks, to me, that's not a risk. If I have a greater than 10-year time horizon and I know that I'm going to be in a diversified portfolio, to me, the risk is taken out of that portfolio. So to me, risk would be what I did in my 30s, where I quit my $500,000 a year job at Lord Abbett, and I started a financial planning practice from scratch. So it went from $500,000 to zero overnight. So that was a huge risk. Then I did it again. I did it twice in my career. When I quit Goldman Sachs, I also gave up a $500,000 plus a year job, quit to run out my non-compete and start over again twice. And I did that in my 50s. So that's risk to me.
Well, Cary, it's been an absolute delight to sit here and speak with you. You spoke about shoes at the beginning, and the phrase that comes to mind when I hear that and listen to our conversation is, if the shoe fits. And I think you have most definitely found a shoe that fits. And your role now in its second coming is clearly as critical and impactful as ever. I look forward to continuing to stay in touch with you and to share your learning with my female clients, as well as to help you amplify this message going forward. So thank you so much for coming here and sharing your insights with us.
Thank you so much.
This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be construed as investment advice, and all views are personal and should not be attributed to the organisations and affiliations of the host or any guest.